everyone, this is David Pike, the Motorcity Mechanic. Now today's video is covering a topic that I've been asked about a lot lately, and that is, can you upgrade the radio in a 2018 Jeep Wrangler JL from the 5.0 or 7.0 all the way up to the 8.4 inch. So what I've done is I've contacted the group over there at Infotainmentcom. They sent me their kit, and that's what we're going to be doing today. We're going to be installing it and showing you all the added features you're going to get when you do this upgrade. Now in today's video, we're going to be swapping out the original 5-inch radio. We're going to go from this to this, the 8.4-inch touchscreen radio with navigation, Apple CarPlay, and Android Auto. Now in order to remove the radio assembly, we're going to have to take the bezel off. But before we can take the bezel off here, we're going to have to get access to two of the fasteners underneath. Because not only does the bezel snap on, but it has two screws securing it to the dash. Now in order to get to those screws, this trim panel right here that contains the AC controls will need to be pulled from the dash. Now in order to remove the trim panel that has the AC controls on it, we're going to be prying it away from the dash. Now it just snaps in place. The best thing to do is grab a plastic trim stick, get up under one of the edges, and kind of work your way around. Start popping it loose. And continue until you get it fully released. Now with that trim panel fully released, we can grab it, rotate it, and we can get to the back side. We got one connector here and one over here on that push to start button. What we're going to do is squeeze in on the lock, wiggle it and slide it off, and do the same thing over here. Now with the AC control head removed, we've got access to the two Phillips screws. Go ahead and take them off, put them somewhere off to the side where you won't lose them. So now that we've removed the two Phillips screws that go underneath that hold the bezel in place, it's time to remove it. And all we need to do is go around one of the edges and pry it away from the dash and kind of work our way around, taking our time. Do the same thing on the other side until you finally get them all released. Now with that trim bezel removed, it's time to remove the 4 Phillips screws around the perimeter. Now if all 4 of the fasteners are removed, we can go ahead and pull the radio forward and tilt it down so we can get to the connectors on the back side. So on the back side, we're going to start with removing these 2 antennas right here. We're going to squeeze in on the lock, slide it off, and do the same thing on the other one. And that leaves us with 2 more connectors to remove. Same procedure, squeeze in on the lock, release it. Same thing for that last one. Now the main connector on the back of the original radio has a special locking mechanism. We've got to release it over here. Once we do, we're going to rotate it up like a lever, and it's actually going to raise the connector away from the radio. So once you release it, start picking it up until it's fully released, and now you can take it and remove it. And now we've got all the connectors unplugged, now we can go ahead and remove the radio from the vehicle. So at this point, we can go ahead and point out everything that comes in the kit from Infotainment.com. Obviously to the left, we've got the 8.4-inch touchscreen radio that's been pre-programmed to the vent of the vehicle. And over here to the right, we've got the bezel that goes all the way around it. Last but not least, we've got the 4-digit anti-theft code, because once we go to install the radio, we're going to have to enter this in order for it to work properly. Now a moment ago, I mentioned that the radio was programmed to the vent of the vehicle it's going into. I said it quickly in passing, but I think I need to slow down and elaborate why that's really important, and why that in itself can actually save you money in the long run. Now on a modern day Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, Ram vehicles, it's built around what we call a series of sales codes. That tells you if it's four-wheel drive, if it's got a Hemi, what color the exterior is, does it have heated seats. All the little smaller details, all related to sales codes. And when you put them together, it becomes a configuration. Now that configuration gets downloaded to the vehicle. At that point, all the modules knows the type of vehicle it's in and everything knows how it's supposed to operate, and they start playing well with one another. Now when you introduce another module into the mix and you don't make those changes, certain things will and will not work. So then you've got to go to the dealership. They need to change the sales codes, download it back into the vehicle. Now at that point everything works well. But of course they're not going to do that for free. They're going to charge you. And that also brings up that anti-theft code. The problem there is if you don't have it and that message comes up where you got to enter it, now you got to go to the dealership. They have to physically remove the radio, get the serial number off the back side, and then they find out that 4-digit code, enter it so that that can work. Once again, guess what? They're not going to do that for free, so they're going to charge you. That could be anywhere from 1 to 2 hours additional labor. So that could be almost $200 more you got to spend just to get everything to work right. So that's why it's important to get it from a company such as Infotainment.com. That way you've got everything you need as soon as you plug it in. So now that we've touched on that, now we can go ahead and grab that radio, get back over to the Wrangler, and start installing it. So now we can grab that main connector, slide it into the back of the radio. As we're pushing down, we're going to grab that lever, make sure it fully snaps into place. Then we're going to grab this other connector that happens to be for the USB port, slide it down, lock it in place. So now that we've got both the USB and the main connector plugged into the back of the radio, we can deal with the smaller ones. Now luckily they're designed so that you cannot install them incorrectly. They got little keys on the side of them so they only line up one way. We'll hook up the red one to the red one, white one to the white. And one thing you want to keep in mind is it's not all about the color. Luckily those line up perfectly. But if you remember on the previous radio, this teal colored came off of a tan colored pin. And that's where we're going to reinstall it. So if all the corresponding connectors plugged in, now we can grab the radio and place it up against the dash and line up all the holes around the perimeter so that we can get started with a Phillips screw. Now if we look at both of the trim bezels side by side, you'll see that they look very similar, almost identical, but they're not. The one on the left is the one from Infotainment.com that comes in the kit with the radio. The one on the right is the one that came with the 5-inch radio. If we were to install that, the problem is we'd actually see the edges of the touchscreen. We don't want that. So instead, we're going to use the one that came in the kit. Now in order to install it, all we're going to be doing is lining up these plastic orange colored snaps into the little cutouts around the perimeter. All we got to do is line it up, get it up against the side, and start pressing it down until it's fully seated. Now with that bezel installed, we can go ahead and install the 2 Phillips screws along the bottom. And before we go reinstalling that trim panel that the AC control head mounts to, we need to pay attention to the harness going to the push to start button. We're going to have to guide it up into this hole right here as we're going back. Just push it through. Start getting the panel lined up. At this point, all we got to do is go around the perimeter and start pushing till it snaps in place. Now the first time you go to start it, it's going to ask for a security code. Luckily, in the kit, we also get that as well. It's something you probably won't find if you get this radio from somebody off eBay, something like that. Once again, it's programmed to the VIN, and we've got the security code. Now the radio is enabled. Now when it comes to controlling the volume on the radio, you're going to have to use the switch on the back of the steering wheel. You don't have any knobs or anything for adjusting it here on the dash. So you got your up and down, that's going to control the volume. You still got your seek button on the opposite side of the steering wheel, as well as the tune button here in the center. Now one of the obvious benefits for upgrading the radio to the 8.4 over the 5-inch is the much larger display. And it really comes in handy, for example, when you've got it in reverse and the backup camera comes on. So you've got the full display, you can see everything behind you. Now there are 2 more features that didn't come with the 5-inch. One of them down here at the bottom is the nav button. Once we select that, we hit view maps, we can actually see where we are. And the other thing is, if you've got an iPhone and a lightning cable plugged in, hooked up to the auxiliary port below the radio, you'll see that the phone goes to CarPlay. Now if I click on that, I've got access to certain features that are on my phone. Now for all you Android lovers, once you download the Android Auto app, you'll have the same basic features. So now you know everything that's involved when it comes to swapping out that 5-inch and upgrading to the 8.4. Now if you go to the dealership and ask about it, they're going to say it's not possible, they don't show a listing. But as you saw in the video, it is possible. So make sure to head over to Infotainmentcom to check it out. Play around on the website, type in whatever make and model you've got, because they have other kits, not just for the Wrangler, but for Toyotas, Nissans, Fords, Chevrolets. They might have something to fit one of your vehicles that you might want to use for upgrading. Now one thing I want to point out is the difference between the 3 different radios, the 5, the 7, and the 8, is the volume control. As I showed you, we went from a 5 that had the radio volume knob on the radio to an 8.4. At that point, we no longer had any controls on the dash other than the back of the steering wheel. Now, if you were using a 7-inch, the 7-inch would already have a volume knob on that AC control panel that we had to take off to get to those fasteners for the trim bezel. So if you upgrade from a 7 to an 8.4, you're still going to retain the volume knob, so you can use that. But like I said, 5.0, you're using the steering wheel controls. So if you liked the video, please make sure to give it a big thumbs up on YouTube. Don't forget you can find me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And if you got any comments or suggestions about anything you saw in today's video, or anything Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, or Ram related, you can always email me at david@motorcitymechanic.com. Also, if you like to shop on Amazon, please feel free to use the link that's in the description below the video. And any purchases that you make will help support this channel. Once again, everybody, thanks for watching.